Started. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for our first meeting of the Anti-Asian Hate and Racial Equity Convening Series. Thank you so much for being here today virtually with us on this beautiful and hot Wednesday. Really incredibly grateful to each and every one of you for joining us tonight as we learn, build, and grow together as a community. Before we begin, I do want to do just some quick housekeeping. We do have language assistance available today for those who requested language assistant when you RSVP. So at this moment, I kind of want to give it to Anupama and Lisa to provide directions both in Hmong and Punjabi to community members who may need the language assistance. So with that, Anupama, if you can go first, that'd be great.
One moment. Council member, there you go.
Okay, go ahead. We didn't hear Anupama, so I just wanted to make sure it was working. Can you all hear?
I can hear you.
Okay. Anupama,
it doesn't look like, Anupama does not look like you are muted. Their audio may be directed at, Mandeep, they are not muted. Their audio may be directed at, got it, figured it out.
Okay, let's try that one more time.
So I need to set Anupama to English or temporarily turn off interpretation. All right, so you should be able to speak up.
Okay, so I wanted to clarify that can you hear me right now?
Yes, we can hear you. Awesome.
So I wanted to clarify that when I'm interpreting, do I press that Punjabi button and English button? Is that how I need to go about it, or I just speak? I wanted to know how you want me to do it.
Yeah, that should work.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see that English and Punjabi anymore on my screen.
No, I temporarily turned that off, so it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, we temporarily turned that off so that you can explain in Punjabi, that folks can hit the globe sign if they need assistance.
Okay, so I speak when I see the globe sign, or do I just speak regardless of any sign they're showing?
So right now, Lisa, why don't you go first really quick in Hmong to explain it, and then I will message Anupame about this.
Okay. Nhớ cho nên sẽ đại cho tụi cho mong ở tụi đúng là thọ cái này sai này lúc screen đó nè giờ thì có bảo lúc vào vòng ở cái interpretation nó sai tụi thì có những mong đồ lu aki lu lo xí lu ya lu họ lu cũng những mong nó chỉ có ya có sao có xí lo xí nó lo xí mông lo lu mong lo xí lu mong nó chỉ có muốn nia con đấy chỉ muốn nia khó ở cái mong đó nè. Is that what you'd like for me to say?
Councilmember, you are muted.
Can't unmute.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Thank you so much, Lisa. Yes, that sounds great. And Anupama, if you can also just be able to say that in Punjabi as well to let folks know that the globe on the bottom of their screen, which will be enabled shortly, if they click on that and click on Punjabi, they should be able to hear you.
Okay, but can I see that globe? I don't see that globe to describe it.
Yes.
So basically, I'm just welcoming them to the conference.
Yes.
And telling them to click on the globe for Punjabi interpretation.
Yes.
And that I'm their interpreter.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me know when I should start speaking.
You can start now. They're watching. Yeah, go ahead.
Sat Sri Akal ji. Good evening. मैं तोड़ी interpreter Anupama हैगी ते मैं तोड़ी पंजाबी विच तोड़ा अनुवाद करांगी ते जिन्हों भी पंजाबी interpreter दी लोड़ हैगी ते तुसी वो जड़ा globe हैगा ते ओते उत्ते click करना ते तोड़नू फिर मेरी interpretation तोड़नू सुनाई देगी ते तोड़ा बड़ा बहुत स्वागत हैगा साडे conference seminar उत्ते.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anupama. So right now, Ryan will enable the globe so that you could start that interpretation. And then Ryan will contact you directly on that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Awesome. Next slide. Thanks, team. So thank you so much. Before we go over our agenda today, I want to give the floor to Alexandra Huyn, our very own Sacramento 2021 National Poet Laureate, to open up our series as we embark on this journey together. Just a little bit about Alexandra. She is the second generation Vietnamese American. She says that poems are spoken every day in the Vietnamese culture because her people has a poetic language. Alexandra draws inspiration from various people like former National Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman, and cites Ocean Vuong and Diana Nguyen as among her favorite writers. I'm really excited to have her join us today to open up this first convening. And Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for the invitation, council member. I'm so excited to be here and share this space with you all. This poem is called The Nail Shop, and I wrote it after visiting the nail shop that my aunties own, and it's sort of a love letter to them. Welcome to the nail shop. The service never fails. Bring your business and we promise to leave you with fine nails. Allow me to take you around. I may not work at the nail shop, but I have witnessed it. Seen how my auntie's fingerprints have become worn away in acetone in exchange for your pristine hands that look like they've never done a day's work, but that's how you like it. Leave the dirty work for the cleaning ladies. They already fling around broken china with their tongues, ought to learn how to pick up after themselves. Con gái này có mũi giống heo. It sounds foreign, so assume the worst and sit satiated knowing their living sits comfortably in your purse. Would you like a demonstration? Here they are. Take your pick of nail color and woman, all named Julie, Jennifer, and Jessica, just for your convenience. Watch as they handle white hands like they tend to God himself, construct temples out of rhinestone, plastic stardust, and whatever else is selected from that colossal shelf that spans across entire walls of the salon and says, here, for you, pick color, I make happen, pick color, I make beautiful. It still amazes me how they manage to maintain such brilliant enthusiasm even in fractional English. Even as the greeting bells, incessant whine, and the heat of bodies fill the room, and the soaked cotton balls and waste bins taint everything with lacquered fumes, and the patrons get more vicious as day bleeds into afternoon, and the head begins to hammer and hurt amidst the hurricane of noise with their inflatable feet and soggy hands as warning signs of natural disaster. But the only statement they manage to issue is, cash please, thank you, come again. I once asked my mother why so many Vietnamese women became nail technicians, and she told me it is because we are a hardworking people, a detailed people who know how to make things beautiful. And I wanted to tell her, yes, but we are sometimes a soft-spoken people, a shipwrecked people who learn to take shelter and weather the storm even after the sun had come out. I can never forget this instinct, plastered firmly onto my soul and sealed in by the kind of glue that holds entire generations together. My hands too will become calloused, veins branching along my skin like the waterways of my motherland. I too will learn to build temples, but only to my own God. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. If you know how to work your reaction on Zoom, feel free to share your reaction to Alexandra and send her love. Yes, absolutely, Professor Rodriguez. It was beautiful and absolutely powerful, and really grateful that our very own Sacramentan Vietnamese American, a young poet, is actually our 2021 National Youth Poet Laureate. And so grateful for her to be here today to really open this up, because this is truly a beginning of our journey together as we embark on this process to ensure that we leave no communities behind, especially Asian Americans who are often seen invisible. And so really grateful, Alexandra, for you speaking truths to power and opening this up to really set the tone for this convening and our series of convenings to come. So I just want to say thank you. If you have time, feel free to chill with us today as well throughout this convening. But I know you're only here for the beginning of it, but we'd love you to join us throughout as well. So thank you so much, Alexandra. Next slide. So I just wanted to give you all just a quick overview of this convening. As many of you know, I see that there is about 66 folks of you on. So that's super exciting because if we were in a room together, that's 66 folks in a room. So I just want to say thank you again for joining us today. As many of you know, anti-Asian hate incidents have been on the rise, but for many of us, it's not something that's new, right? There is multiple and intergenerational harm and trauma that our community holds very deeply. And earlier this year, as many of you know, our council passed a resolution to condemn anti-Asian hate incidents and attacks in our city and in our state. And passing this resolution was really just the first critical step in laying the foundation and a commitment in the fight and work ahead that we collectively have together as a city and with community advocates and our Asian American sisters and brothers and siblings across the city. For me, it was really important to acknowledge the deep and painful racist history of this country towards Asian immigrants and Asian Americans, including what is happening now. And so I just also want to share that this resolution, and the reason why we're all here today is because this resolution is not just a piece of paper, but it specifically calls out to ensure that our mayor and our city council will do three things. And two of them I want to uplift is that one, that we will commit to working with Asian Americans, community partners in support of data gathering that is culturally appropriate and acknowledge the systemic barriers to reporting hate crimes impacting Asian Americans. And the last piece is that the mayor and the council will work jointly with members of the Asian American community to develop tangible community-led solutions through the city racial equity initiative that acknowledges the experience of Asian American residents and root out systemic racism and uplift racial solidarity. That was part of the resolution, and that is our commitment, and that's the reason why we're all here today. In collaboration with the small but mighty steering committee that you're going to get an opportunity to meet, and with three of my colleagues, Vice Mayor Jay Schenirer, Councilmember Guerra, and Councilmember Jennings, we're hosting these convenings as a commitment to that resolution. And really the goal of this event today is really to be a starting point to gauge us as a community as we enter this very important topic. And today's meeting is really important because it really sets the context. I also want to share, and I'm going to give a shout out to the steering committee, is that they were very intentional about doing these three series instead of having one big one so that we can jam all this information. We wanted to be intentional, thoughtful about how we do this in creating community-led solutions. And so these are the three convenings that we will be hosting, and you're participating in the first one today. So today is really focused on understanding and acknowledging systemic racism impacting Asian Americans resident and their current experiences, right? Just because I'm Hmong American doesn't mean that I know everything about the history of Asian Americans in Sacramento. So it's really important that we have educator and folks who actually been doing the work on the ground to share with us these type of lived histories of Sacramento. The second convening is what is currently being done, right? So the next convening will be on June 30th, and it's really focused on what is currently being done to address this, what are the gaps, and this convening will also allow the community and government to share any current efforts to address anti-Asian hate in Sacramento. And the third convening will focus on really strengthening and supporting anti-Asian hate and anti-racist efforts in the city, and really continue to identify gaps and actions needed to achieve and sustain racial solidarity and equity in Sacramento. Each of these convenings build on each other. It's very organic, and so you are part of this as we're co-creating together. That's really important to me. When I was elected as councilwoman, I said this seat doesn't belong to me, but it belongs to the people, and the decisions that we make must be co-created by all of you. And so really grateful for that. And so at the conclusion of the convening series, led by Vice Mayor Jay Schenirer, Councilmember Guerra, Councilmember Jennings, and our amazing steering committee that you're going to meet shortly. We really hope to have community-led next steps and solutions from you that acknowledges the experiences of Sacramento, Asian American residents, and continue to promote with action steps. What does that mean when we talk about racial equity and solidarity in the city? So again, I also want to note that participation in all three convening is highly encouraged, but not required. We did put like 3 to 4 weeks in between, right? So that folks can have conversation with their families, their loved one, and their neighbors to debrief and come back for each convening. And again, we will have interpretation provided upon request. So when you RSVP, you can definitely also ask for interpretation. Next slide. I also just want to give a shout out to all of the community supporters and organization. Want to let you know that you can also sign on as an organization as well to support these convenings. I think there is a lot of power behind numbers. And so I really want to give a shout out to all the organizations that have signed on and also the individuals. Jaime, if you can go to the next slide. And if you'd like to sign on and support, you can go to this site right here. It links you to the website with all of the information regarding the convenings, and we'd love all of you to sign on. So individuals and organizations that have signed on, we just also want to say thank you. All right, so next piece is introduction. We're going to go into our panel, but before we begin, I really want this opportunity to introduce a steering committee, small but mighty, incredible advocates on the ground, advocates and leaders on the ground that's really assisting us to get here today. I definitely want an opportunity for them to introduce themselves. And before that, I actually would like my colleagues to say a few words. So I'm just going to call out your name, and Ryan, if you can unmute them, that would be great. So first is Vice Mayor Jay Schenirer.
Thank you, Councilwoman. First of all, I just want to say it's an honor to be here and want to give you a shout out for being the catalyst behind all of this. I think it's really important. You know, I think that we all have a vision of the city that we want to live in, of what Sacramento could be. And we have so many attributes here. But what that really requires over time is things like this, where we can really get down and have a good discussion with each other, learn each other's history. I'm a firm believer that until we know one another, we're never going to get to solutions. So I think this is a great start. I'm looking forward to the next hour and a half or so. And again, just thank you for putting this together.
Thanks so much, Vice Mayor Jay Schenirer. I also want to share that Vice Mayor Jay Schenirer and Councilmember Guerra, who's going next, is actually leading the Racial Equity Initiative work as well. So really excited that they're leading that work. So they are very committed, and that's why they're also here. And their staff is amazing and helping to co-lead this. So thank you so much, Vice Mayor. Really appreciate all your great work. So with that, I will hand it over to Councilmember Guerra.
Well, thank you. And it's also so great to see so many great faces today. And particularly, you know, the fact that we're all here to really tackle an issue that that affects all of us. Definitely one of the issues that I know from my district here. Today we had the rededication of the Little Saigon corridor there on Stockton Boulevard. Very, very wonderful, uplifting, proudful day. But we've, you know, in the neighborhood here, which is a very diverse neighborhood, have had our share of experiences to our business owners, our community residents, or there have been that anti-Asian hate. And so seeing the number of folks here today coming together to say, how do we work together to address all of this? Because it doesn't just affect one person in the community. And if you go down to Southeast Village or Fruit Ridge Manor, you'll find that many of our Southeast Asian community members live amongst the Latino community, the African American community, and the longtime Sacramentans. And so it affects all of our community health. I want to thank, I see Frank Louie here and Mai Vang, who have been longstanding champions on the corridor, helping us there. So I'm excited to be here and getting to work.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Guerra. Councilmember Jennings wasn't able to join us today, but I do have Dennis here who would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Councilmember. On behalf of Councilmember Jennings, he wants to apologize for not being here. He had a family emergency back on the East Coast, and he's actually on an airplane right now coming home. Everything seems to have worked out, but he is strongly committed to this and looks forward to participating in the next two convenings and listening and learning on how he can help.
Thank you so much. And Dennis didn't introduce himself. Dennis, you should introduce yourself. Who are you? What's your position?
I'm Mr. Jennings' Chief of Staff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dennis. And then I'd like to have the steering committee introduce themselves really quick. If you can say your name and what organization you're part of, that would be great. So I'm just going to call out your name. And if you want to say a few words, please do. So I'll go with Vince first.
Hello, everyone. Vince Salas here with Everyday Impact Consulting. I'm also the chair of Pacific Rim Heritage Foundation, whose mission is to build a community center for the Filipino American population here in Sacramento. I'm also a lifetime member of Filipino community of Sacramento and vicinity. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Vince. Mai Vang.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name's Mai Vang, and I'm the Executive Director for CPAL, stands for Community Partners Advocates of Little Saigon, Sacramento. Been serving the Vietnamese American community in Sacramento since 2008, and I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mai. Josh?
Hello, good evening. My name is Josh Kaizuka. I am the co-president of the Florence chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League and also part of Tsuru for Solidarity, basically working with all the community to address all these issues that really impact our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. Lee?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lee Lo. My pronouns are she and they, and I am a co-director for the Sacramento API Regional Network. We are a grassroots organization that really came together with a lot of other Asian American leaders to really address the inequities and racial injustices that we are witnessing here in Sacramento, and wanting to really address a lot of the disproportionate impact of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. Megan?
Hello, everyone. I'm Megan Sapigao, and my pronouns are she and her, and I am the other co-director of the Sacramento Asian and Pacific Islander Regional Network. And as Lee said, really a coalition trying to organize as a community to address inequity, to build power, to build capacity, and liberate our communities. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you to everyone who's joining.
Thank you so much, Megan. Mandeep?
Hello, everyone. Thank you to the City of Sac and Councilmember Vang for organizing this. My name is Mandeep Singh. I'm the community organizer for Jakarta Movement. We are the largest youth organization in California for Punjabi Sikhs. And we work daily with high schoolers, college students, and our community members, as you'll see later. And yeah, we're just glad to be here. And, you know, one of my friends often says, you know, a lot of times we think our lives here started when our parents immigrated here, but we often forget that we've been here for over 100 years and we've built foundations for this country. So, you know, it's really important. I think we kind of keep that in mind as we go forward. And yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Mandeep. And then we also have one more person. I like to acknowledge Nancy Shong. She couldn't be here today, but the executive director of HIP Hmong Innovating Politics. She's also been part of the steering committee. Again, I just want to give a shout out because we wouldn't be at this moment without their love, their care, their support, and their guidance. It's really important that we co-lead as electeds with community organization. And so I'm just so grateful for their leadership. I also want to say, obviously, each of these convenings build upon each other. And so if you'd like to join the steering committee, please let us know. At the end, we'll give you our contact information. It's really important that we can continue to include more voices. So if you'd like to be part of the planning process for convening 2 and 3, we welcome that. So please let the steering committee know, or Vice Mayor Jay Schenirer, Councilmember Guerra, or Councilmember Jennings know, so that we can include you in meetings moving forward. So with that, I am going to kick it over to Councilmember Guerra to go over Nope, I am not following the agenda. I'm supposed to review the agenda real quick, and then I'll kick it over to Councilmember Guerra. So just really quick, so you kind of know where this convening is going today. Councilmember Guerra is going to kick us off and review some of the community agreements. And then Councilmember Schenirer is going to facilitate a presentation of the AAPI history in Sacramento and institutional harms experienced by other communities of color. We have a great panel for that, for us to learn and grow together. And then Josh one of our steering committee will facilitate a panel of recent experience that has happened here in Sacramento and in the region as well. And then what we'll do is we're going to go into breakout sessions. I do want to share that the breakout sessions will not be recorded because we do want to create a safe space. And so the reflection session will not be recorded, but staff members and committee steering member will be taking notes so that we could bring it back when we're planning the second convening. So once we do the small breakout, we're going to do the large group reflection, and actually Megan, who you heard from earlier, will help facilitate both of those sections. And then we'll preview the next convening, what's going to happen next, and then we'll do a closing performance, but I just got a text message from Mandeep that Salvin won't be able to join us. So I was really hoping, and hopefully maybe he will be able to join us at the next convening. So literally just got the text right now that he won't be able to join. So no closing performance, but grateful that we got Alex to perform earlier. And so with that, that is the agenda, and I'm going to kick it off to Councilmember Guerra.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. This is going to be a little interactive here. So first of all, if everybody can go to the bottom of their screen and look for the reaction button, you know, you could use all kinds of, or we're going to ask everyone to use the reaction button here. And for this little next exercise, way for us to be able to ground our conversation. That's how I felt this morning with so much joy, you know, when we were at the Little Saigon dedication. But I'm going to ask everyone if they could use the thumbs up button if they agree. So here's just kind of some ground rules that we want folks to help us with this. And so if everyone, can, as I point out, one of the ground rules of people can use the reaction button and agree or disagree. And if you agree here, we ask you to use the thumbs up button here. So number one, let's show respect to impacted communities. So if you agree with that, let's put your thumbs up button on the reaction button here. You know, again, if you we want to, number one, show respect to impacted communities. Great, love to see all those thumbs up there. Definitely, you know, I'll give a heart emoji for agreeing to that. Number two, let's be open to learning other perspectives. All of us come from different walks of life. All of us come from different experiences, even within our own community and heritage. We come from different experiences. So if you agree with that, let's put that thumbs up there. Great, like that. This is we wanted this place to be safe. So we want to honor privacy, but share what you learn with others, but not necessarily direct them about individuals. So if you honor privacy and ensure that, you know, as we learn and whatnot, let's make sure that we, you know, as we leave this experience, that we not necessarily take out individuals and call out individuals, that we use this opportunity for us to be able to talk amongst each other. The other one here, we get sometimes caught up in talking in third persons or hyperbole or rhetoric. Let's speak with our own experiences and not for others. Let's speak today, if you agree about speaking about how you feel and what you've experienced, but don't speak on behalf of somebody else in this experience today, because we want this dialogue to be amongst this group here. So if you agree with that aspect, let's speak with your own experience. Make space for others to speak. You know, this is particularly one for us as elected officials. We have to step back, and in this experience, we want to make sure others get a chance to speak. And if you see others that maybe haven't had a chance, engage them and take the space to share. Encourage them to talk, and also if you don't share often, this is a time for us to say, hey, we want you to participate. So making space for others. So if those are ground rules, if you all agree with those ground rules, let's everybody do a big heart emoji here, and say, let's get started on this conversation. I think our next subject here, conversation, I think is going to require a lot of heart to move through. With that, I don't know, my Councilmember Vang, Councilwoman Vang, if you want to introduce our Vice Mayor, or I'll just pass it over.
Yeah.
We actually have a poll.
Oh, we actually have a poll, yeah.
Good.
Brian, did you want to provide direction on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you will see a poll pop up in 1 second asking if you agree to, abide by the community agreements that Councilmember Guerra reviewed. You can simply hit yes or no, and we'll get some consensus. All right, and with that, we have 100% agreement. I think we're good to move forward.
Awesome, that's great. Thank you. So with that, we'll kick it off to Vice Mayor Jay Schenirer.
Great, thank you, Councilwoman. So I have the pleasure of facilitating a panel here of very seasoned and incredibly smart individuals. We have first Jeff Ogata. He's a retired attorney who worked for Legal Services of Northern California, the California Energy Commission, the Attorney General's Office, and the State Water Resources Control Board. He's worked with several API organizations to advocate for equal rights and justice, and was recently honored by the Asian Pacific State Employees Association for years of service to the community. Second, we have May O. Lee. I think I've known May for about 27 years. I was trying to think back on when we first met. It would have been probably 1994, 95. She is a longtime community activist for over 35 years, founder of Asian Resources, Inc., ARI, a community service organization, and she's co-founder of API's Rise, a giving circle making change and empowerment. And finally, we have Dr. Robin Rodriguez, who is a professor in the UC Davis Asian American Studies Department. Dr. Robin Rodriguez has published widely on Asian American issues and activism with 2 forthcoming books on the topic due out over the course of the next 6 months. Very busy. She is the founding director of the Bulosan Center of Filipinx Studies. Dr. Rodriguez has been a committed advocate supporting a range of immigrant rights and racial justice movements for over 20 years. More can be found, and we will put in the chat her email or her website if people are interested. So we have about 20 minutes, I'm told, for this panel. So let's start off. May Oli, do you want to start? I feel like you've been here and working so long in this community. I would love to hear from you first.
Well, I would love to do that, but I think I'm going to defer to Dr. Robin Rodriguez, who's going to give us an overview of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you for that. Yes, thank you. Of course, I'm trying to cover a really broad swath of history here, but we'll do the best we can so that we can provide at least some historical context for understanding why it is that we have such a significant population of Asian Americans in Sacramento and the greater Sacramento region. So the United States has long been a country that has depended on racialized labor, from enslavement of Africans at the country's founding to the employment of undocumented Mexican workers today. The presence of Asians in America is linked to this feature of the US economy. Yet, there has always been a tension, between the United States' demand for racialized labor on one hand and anti-immigrant white supremacist demands that the United States as a nation be one that limits economic and political opportunities to only those who are considered authentic Americans. So you've got this tension, and this tension between racialized labor demand and white supremacist notions of belonging and citizenship explain the very different waves of Asian immigration to the United States historically. And it's a tension in which today's anti-Asian hate and violence is rooted. So this is very, very important because we really want to make sure that we're not seeing anti-Asian hate as this recent phenomenon. It really has a deep, deep history that's intertwined with Asian American immigration history. So some of the earliest groups of Chinese immigrants to the United States and ultimately to this region were attempting to try their luck in the gold rush of California that began in 1848. By the late 1860s, the Chinese population had grown tremendously. And after the Civil War, it became a new source of cheap labor for what was now a rapidly industrializing United States. With the divisions between the North and the South mending and so-called manifest destiny having extended the borders of the US from east to west, the country would require an infrastructure that would facilitate the movement of people and goods across state borders. It was at this moment that construction of the Transcontinental Railroad would begin in earnest, for which Chinese workers were aggressively recruited. When the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869, Chinese immigrants found new forms of employment. Here in the Sacramento area, in the Sacramento Delta, they were hired to build the levees that would make the lands in this region farmable. Then later, they would be recruited to work the farms. However, white working class organizations, including labor unions and political parties, such as the Working Men's Party, constructed Chinese immigrants as a so-called yellow peril. As a yellow peril, the Chinese were figured first as an economic threat who were taking jobs away from white American citizens by undercutting their wages. Moreover, they were seen as a cultural threat that somehow practiced a strange religion because they were not Christian. They were even constructed as a menacing sexual threat to white women. Eventually, anti-Chinese sentiment would result in the passage of the first and only explicitly racialized anti-immigration law in the US, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Employers would then turn to other Asian countries for labor. The first major source of labor after China was Japan. Shortly after the Chinese Exclusion Act was signed, US officials negotiated with Japanese government officials for the recruitment and deployment of Japanese workers, first to Hawaii's sugar plantations, then they would be recruited to California. Like the Chinese, the Japanese faced great hostility, which would culminate in the passage of restrictive immigration legislation in 1907 called the Gentleman's Agreement. Despite this, many Japanese Americans eventually managed to actually lease and own land. But that too would spark new forms of anti-Asian sentiment, leading to state laws like California's Alien Land Law of 1913, which prohibited so-called aliens ineligible for citizenship. So no Asians at this time who were immigrants were eligible to be naturalized for citizenship. So those who were considered aliens ineligible for citizenship couldn't be tenants or small-scale agricultural proprietors. So now, between massive displacement due to US colonization and then the inculcation of the American dream, the colonial schooling, Filipinos were then primed to leave the Philippines for jobs in the US. Where recruiters came to the islands to secure workers for Hawaii and California's agricultural industries because other sources of Asian labor were now unavailable, right? First you had the Chinese, excluded Japanese, and excluded Filipinos become the source of labor. And part of why they were so attractive to employers is because they were considered US nationals, because they were actually colonial subjects. And because of that, they were able to allow the US, they were allowed to enter the US without the same kinds of restrictions applied to the Chinese and the Japanese. But again, Filipinos would experience the wrath of anti-Asian forces in the form of white vigilante mobs, and eventually they too were restricted from entering the US with the passage of the Tidings-McDuffie Act of 1934. Now, though they constituted fewer numbers of immigrants, at least at this time, as compared to some of these big early groups like the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Filipinos, the early migration histories of Koreans and, of course, Indians are also worth noting, especially because they become far more sizable populations in the US after 1965. So in the first decade of the 20th century, several thousand Koreans were recruited to work in Hawaii's plantations. Around the same time, immigrants from India would also make their way to the US to work as agricultural laborers, but mainly in California. Of course, for those of you who are aware of this, Yuba City area, of course, was an especially significant site for settlement. Many Indians were from the state of Punjab in India. It's interesting because many Punjabis came to California to escape anti-Punjabi riots in the Pacific Northwest, only to face greater anti-Asian sentiment here in the state as well. And that then led to the Immigration Act of 1917, which would create the so-called Asiatic barred zone. And that actually defined the geographic scope through latitude and longitude of Asian immigrant exclusion. During World War II, some of these restrictions were relaxed a bit, especially for those countries that were considered US allies. By 1965, the US introduced the Hart-Celler Act, or the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, and that ended all the racial exclusions of the past. It also was characterized by a logic of favoring family reunification and even the migration of professionals. And so that would lead not only to a major influx of Asian immigrants to the US and to the region, but it would also change the demographic profile of Asian immigrant populations, because now they would be more college educated, and they were able to settle with their loved ones, unlike the low wage, low status, largely bachelor migrations of the past. In the US's bid to compete with the Soviet Union for global ascendancy during the Cold War, that too would precipitate other kinds of migration flows from Asia. And of particular significance for our region is the impact of the Vietnam War, which would lead not only to the migration of Vietnamese refugees, but also refugees from other neighboring Southeast Asian countries, such as Cambodia and Laos. Those flows would also include many ethnic minority groups like the Hmong and the Mien, who were recruited to fight to advance American interests in the so-called secret war. So again, this is just a very, very fast and very quick cursory overview of Asian migration history to the United States and the region. But I just want to restate my point at the beginning of this overview, and that is to understand the Asian migration experience, we must situate it as being shaped by the tension between racialized labor demand and white supremacist ideas of belonging. And it's this tension that is shaping today's anti-Asian hate and violence, right? This is where it's all rooted. Later, I will provide more data on incidences of anti-Asian hate and violence here based on the figures we've secured from the Stop AAPI Hate Hotline, because the Bulusan Center is a national research partner to the Stop AAPI Hate Hotline. Whereas for those of you who have an interest in diving deeper into the Asian American experience, many of you serve constituencies of Asian Americans, and many of you who may be identified as Asian Americans may not even know this. I do invite you to take a look at some of my work, and I will be offering an online class for the broader public at some time soon, and you can look at my website for that. But again, I look forward to continuing this conversation and looking at those statistics on anti-Asian hate later on. But thank you for giving me this opportunity to share this overview. Hopefully it helps.
Thank you. That was great. Really sets things in perspective of how we got to where we are. So who is next? Nay or Jeff?
Yes.
Nay.
Nay. Thank you. I want to thank Dr. Rodriguez for that clear overview, but I want to also thank Jeff Ogata, who is doing a little PowerPoint. He did the PowerPoint and contributed a lot with the text, and he'll be available for the question and answers. But he told me, given the limited amount of time, that I'm supposed to do the talking because I think I can talk faster. Well, anyways, I only can go as far back as in the mid-1970s, when I first came to Sacramento. I really had to search for an Asian community. Unlike cities in LA, San Francisco, or even Seattle, where I came from, there was no visible J-town or China Manila town or even an international district. Well, I found out what happened was Sacramento did in the 1960s a huge redevelopment, urban renewal project, and they hollowed out a vibrant West End capital community. And we know where that is now, where Macy's and the Golden One Arena is. This community was made up of Blacks, Chinese, Japanese, Latino, up to 400 businesses and residents, and they were scattered after that. And so what happened was they then would scatter them to, well, I want to actually call, they redlined them to like the Blacks to the Oak Park community, and many of the Chinese and Japanese to the Southside Park area. So that was what was happening. That was the lens, the groundwork there. But there also weren't any at all service organizations. They were still the old family ones, like the Kenjinkais and the associations by the Chinese, and even on a different level, JACLs. But you know, there wasn't any, really few of, if any, service organizations aimed to help the API communities. So what happened was Sac State students, led by community activist Professor Earl Sharoy, he organized the Asian seniors to go before and challenge City Hall to secure funds for recreation and social classes. That was the beginning of what, from this activism, the rise of the Asian Community Center, ACC, which was the base for the API service organizations that many still operate to this day. And the service model, we identified it based on needs, such as Health for All was a family preventive health care organization. The Asian Pacific Community Counseling, APCC, was for mental health. And the employment training component I took over after I finished social work school, and it became ARI. So there were also existing Saturday Paul Hom Clinic led by UC Davis medical students, and Asian Legal Services Outreach, also by law students, and they were provided seed grants to help you know, further this. And then ACC then continued to organize their senior programs and services and launch what we know today, of course, Nursing Home Care Center, the Maple Tree Village, the assisted care, Meals on Wheels, and so forth. Well, what happened was that out of this one organization became many. And this was a strategic move to create and empower as many organizations with their own infrastructure of governance and independently seek funds to address each of their own community needs, rather than be an umbrella organization which could become too unyielding and management or fiscal wise. So in the organizing and activism in Sacramento, to me, was really unique in many ways. Not only were we trying to keep, you know, a concept of Asian API together, hence organizations like ARI and ACC, the organizers also realized that there was a lack of number for each, the lack of number of each ethnic group wouldn't translate into political power. And I want to give an example that the Asian Bar Association was first found with this concept in mind, but they took it a step further and collaborated with the Wiley Manuel and La Raza Bar Associations to form a unity bar. And this resulted in an Asian lawyer being appointed judge. And it also led to many other appointments of the other folks of color. There's another example I want to talk about how we collaborated. We joined forces forming the MLK Expo and Job Fair in March. Now it's MLK 365. Back in those days, we used it as an organizing platform to change what was then Sacramento Boulevard to become Martin Luther King Boulevard. At first, it was to only target the 6-mile stretch within city limits, but then we went not only to City Hall, but then we went to the county and then encompassed crossing through the county lines. And this grassroots effort was made up of Blacks, Asians, you know, white clergy, churches, and proved very, very successful. So there was our activism was done in collaboration. And I wanted to say ARI also used the ACC model to continue to launch and help other programs, refugee programs too. But my main one was we helped launch My Sister's House, a domestic violence shelter for women meeting multicultural needs of the API immigrants and refugees. So I wanted to say our activism also included in the 1990s when white supremacists firebombed Mayor Jimmy Yee's house, the NAACP, and the Sacramento JCL office, along with the Jewish temple. Immediate coalition of communities came together to denounce the racist hatred. So up to present day, the anti-Asian racism exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic says that the lessons we have learned, we must be that much more intentional and really get to the heart of the racism. And really, ethnic studies plays an important, crucial role to tell our stories and the inherent institutionalized racism of society, but in the context with our Black, Brown, Indigenous, and LGBTQ communities. I'm going to stop right there and turn it back over to Dr. Robin.
Hi, everyone. What I'm going to do, because I know I just want to recognize that we may be pressed for time, and it seems like it would be really important to be able to have time for the breakout groups and other kinds of collective discussion. But I am going to share the link in the chat to the Stop AAPI report that we just put out for the region, that it's there. And I will quickly share screen just so you can see some of the numbers that we got from the Stop AAPI Hate Hotline. So a couple of things too I should note is, in addition to the report that we put out just last week, we also have a podcast that one of our students produced that that documents the experiences of different Asian Americans during COVID, which include, of course, anti-Asian hate. So this is the report that we did, just really quick numbers. These are only those reported, mind you. Mind you, there's a lot that doesn't get reported. So these are the reports of incidents of discrimination in the region. 66 were reported. We've got 63% are reporting discrimination consisting primarily of verbal attacks. And these attacks are happening mainly in business areas. Of those who are reporting, 40% nearly are identify as Chinese, and women are 2 times more likely to be targeted compared to their male counterparts. So again, the details of the report are in. I've sent you the link in the chat. That is, so you can look at it in more depth. There was a report that we had produced last year, so you can sort of see the change in numbers. But again, part of the challenge is that Asian Americans are not always reporting. Sometimes it's also hard for people to discern, even if an experience might be rooted in anti-Asian hate. And so people might be reluctant to report that as well. But these are the kinds of numbers that we've been able to pull in partnership with the Stop AAPI Hate Hotline. And so I'll just go ahead and stop sharing from there, and then go on to, hopefully we can just have more discussion after.
Thank you so much. And I actually do want to allow for Q&A. So I'm going to have Vice Mayor Schenirer do Q&A. We are a little bit behind, but I do want to allow opportunities for the audience if they have any questions. Well, maybe the next 5 minutes we'll do that, and then we'll go straight into our panel and then reflection. My closing will be short now, given that we don't have a closing performance. So we're able to adjust some time. So with that, Vice Mayor Schenirer, if anybody wants to ask a question, I'll have you facilitate this part.
Great, thank you very much. If you have a question, if you want to use the raise hand function in participants, that would be great. We'll see. We have lots of leaders in the room, and leaders go first. So anyone who is interested and has a question.
Any questions from anyone?
I'll go ahead and ask mainly. Oh, here we go. Vince Sales.
I've been Salas here.
Sorry.
No worries. A question. To what do you attribute the escalation of anti-Asian hate and violence that's taking place right now?
And that question is for Professor Rodriguez.
Any of the panelists, to Dr. Rodriguez, Mei Lee, or Jeff Ogata?
Well, Vince, we're the other, you know, and so it's easy. I think the history part that Dr. Rodriguez gave, it's a whole litany of how we are the other, you know, and of course the rhetoric that came from Trump's, you know, the Chinese virus and the Gong flu and all that kind of stuff has really exacerbated. So, Jeff.
Yeah, I think it's same as what Dr. Reeves was alluding to. It's a lot about economics. It's a lot about the fact that Asians have never been seen as citizens of this country, always been the other people, which is why no matter where you go, people always ask you where you're from, because they don't believe that we can be Americans. And I think that has never gone away. And I think that's something that we're always going to have to combat. And it's perception that we're going to have to change in some fashion.
That's right. And just to quickly add, yes, there has been a history that I didn't do necessarily a history of anti-Asian hate and violence. But yes, at moments of crisis, and whether it's that the United States is at war with an Asian country, and then kind of anti-Asian hate gets mobilized in that way. In the early 2000s, for instance, when George Bush declared a global war on terror, the enemy that was figured as the enemy was South Asians, largely in this country, and Muslims. Before that, in the 80s, during that economic crisis, when Japan, the Japanese economy, was seen as sort of as responsible for the decline in the auto manufacturing industry of Detroit. Asians were targeted as well, and during those Buy American campaigns leading to the murder of Chinese American Vincent Chin, so many other experiences. But yes, I think it's really important that on one hand, we can understand some of the spike as connected to the rhetoric of the previous administration, but also in the crisis that we're contending with COVID. But again, these are not new. It's not new, the ways in which these rhetorics get deployed against Asians over American, over the course of American history.
Great, thank you. Alexandra, you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to thank all the speakers first for just speaking with us today. It was very informative, but I wanted to ask, I really want to share what I've learned with my parents and with the extended members in my family, but I don't know how to have this conversation with them and ground it in truth while making it also empowering. So how would you recommend going about that?
Who would like to handle that?
That's a very tough question, Alexandra, especially if I'm assuming you're thinking about maybe folks who might have immigrated to the United States, who may not have had the opportunity who weren't necessarily schooled in the United States. Although, of course, you could be schooled in the United States and be Asian American and still not have these kinds of histories available, because we don't yet have ethnic studies all across the school system in California, the country. But I do think I think it's possible. I do think it's possible to engage in different dialogues. I think this is where we have to lean on our community-based organizations to help work with them in creating kind of educational programs that can be accessible to newcomers or immigrants. In my own experience, I did a lot of volunteer work. I'm a Bay Area native, did a lot of volunteer work in San Francisco in the Filipino Community Center. And I was working with a lot of newcomers, and we did a lot of programming that helped to raise kind kind of the folks' consciousness about Asian immigrant history, because it was empowering to really understand the roots of Asian immigration. It helped them understand their shared, the common interests they share with other communities of color. So it is possible, but it also it means delivering some of the content in very different kinds of ways. And so, of course, it meant delivering some of this education in language, so vital, especially for newcomers, being able to kind of, if they haven't been in a formal classroom setting for a long time, it's not even just about having it available in language, but also being, creative about the delivery. But I guess the point being that I think it's possible. I think there are really great examples already. And I think that, to what extent we can continue to do that work. I think that's why the work of the API Regional Network is so vital. They were trying to provide that opportunity for folks, early on when the pandemic, when the network was formed, trying to really be mindful of providing in language translations for folks to ensure that they were really understanding what was available in terms of resources. So language access is so vital. Working in partnership with community-based organizations also so vital, especially I think reaching that generation of newcomers.
Great, thank you. Let's go ahead. We have time for a couple more very quick questions. Bobby Roy, you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know, May or Jeffrey, could you speak to whatever happened with or maybe you can, Vice Mayor, about whatever happened with the Pacific Rim Festival? I used to really look forward to that as an institution from the city, and that was provided to our community. And having May, API Heritage Month just passed, and happy Pride, everyone. We didn't have that this year, right? I even tried to get the writer with the SACB to talk about it and write an article about it before she was let go by the B, which also has some racist history, with V.S. McClatchy being a complete anti-Asian, provocateur. And then also the Asian Theater Company, Interactive Asian Contemporary Theater. That's how I learned about Vincent Chin. That's how I learned about, I got a deeper analysis of the Good Guys incident that happened in the Florin area. I guess what happened to those two institutions, because I felt that they were doing a lot of good work to share our stories and help other folks understand who we were in the community.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't have an answer for that. Let me ask if Jeff or one of the panelists knows. Jeff?
Well, the Pacific Rim, am I on?
Yeah, you're on.
The Pacific Rim Festival was moved primarily by Frank Fatt and the Fatt family. And there were a lot of issues around economics, a lot of issues when he passed away, a lot of issues about Old Sac and the business people there, having some problems with the festival as well. So there's a lot of different things involved, and I'm not an expert on exactly what happened, but I think a combination of a lot of those things sort of led to the demise. COVID certainly didn't help. With respect to Interact, again, the founders just sort of, I think, ran out of energy and ran out of resources. It was a very tough thing to have an Asian American theater company here when there wasn't really a whole lot of folks, flocking to attend those things. I mean, I personally acted in one of those plays, and I could tell you it was very hard to get the resources to put on the kind of performances that the founders really wanted to do. So
yeah, I just might add, Jeff, that unfortunately or sadly, Dennis Yap, he and Hetty, they moved to the San Francisco area, but Dennis has now passed too. So yeah, that's a sign of the times. But I think you're hitting at the heart of it. We didn't have some of the support that was generated, and founders like Frank Fatt has, they've gone too. So yeah.
All right, well, thank you. I know we had some other questions. If you want to put them in the chat, we'll see if we can get those answered, but I know we need to move on. We have another panel and breakout sessions. So let me thank our three panelists. We really appreciate it, and really good perspective from Dr. Robin Rodriguez. Thank you. Mai, back back to you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Schenirer. I know this event ends at 7:30, so I really want to be mindful of time. This is the reason why we have 3 series, because there's just so much to unpack. So if you do have any questions, please put it in the chat. I want to make sure that we're able to answer those questions. And with that, I want to hand over to Josh, because we do have 2 panelists that are here today to share their lived experience of what's been happening on the ground before we break into our reflection. That's going to be led by Megan. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Josh. And Josh, if we could just, I know we set aside 10 minutes for this, but I'm thinking like 6 minutes, because I really do want to allow time for our breakout session, but also want to honor Dr. Carr and also Kelly for being here today. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I wanted to introduce our panelists. First, Dr. Rajneet Kaur Sikhan, who's a community physician. She comes from an immigrant family from North India in the state of Punjab and has lived in California most of her life. Has been in Sacramento for 11 years. She is a family medicine physician who currently practices in long-term care, geriatrics, and hospice care. She's a mother of a 4th and 5th grader, wow, and whose education has been in Sacramento County. She hopes we can make a supportive and inclusive community for our future generations that encourages love over hate. Kelly Shum is the owner of Mad Butcher Meat Company, and which is a Chinese-owned butcher company in Sacramento. Today, she'll be speaking about the economic and business implications for the AAPI small business owners. First, to Dr. Sikhan. Can you share your experiences with anti-Asian hate and discrimination that you've experienced?
Dr. Carr, can we hear you? Just want to make sure.
Yeah. Is your mic on?
Well, Dr. Carr appears to be unmuted. Perhaps we'll let Kelly go first and let Dr. Carr catch up.
Kelly, just same question to you. Can you share any experiences you've had regarding anti-Asian hate?
I mean, yeah, unfortunately, I think most people know me now as the Chinese American butcher shop where someone dropped off a dead cat in front of it in February. That was a really tough time for me. I actually recently got word from the DA saying that they couldn't charge him on a hate crime and that they couldn't really press charges further. It's actually something that's very extremely disappointing. And so I'm glad that we have meetings like this so that we're able to bring a little bit more visibility to what's happening to us, and so that people know that, you know, that this is happening and we're here and we need support and help.
Kelly, are you still there?
Yeah, hi, sorry. You guys like cut out a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if Dr. Carr is back on the line, but Kelly, the incident with the cat, was that the first time you've experienced anti-Asian hate at your business or in your personal life?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No. And, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, because me and my staff are primarily Asian immigrant workers, you know, people were calling us China virus. They were calling us super dirty and that they were going to get diseases from our food. And I guarantee you no other butcher shop in town was having, you know, they weren't hearing the same thing. So that was really, really difficult for us. Very hard time to retain staff because they're scared for their safety. From our food, and I guarantee you no other butcher shop in town was having, you know, they weren't hearing the same thing.
Yeah, we were having some weird feedback, but Kelly, I remember coming out to your business after the incident. And you mentioned that you had to kind of take things down from your shop to make it look like it wasn't Asian owned.
Yeah, of course. You don't want to be a target. It's already a very like tense time. You don't really want to add anything that aggravates that.
Yeah. Dr. Carr, are you available now?
she may have had to step away. I think nobody's sitting in her seat, right?
Yeah.
So
I
it looks
can
like we
share.
should
Like,
move on.
if that's
Mandeep,
okay
if you
with
could
you all.
share briefly.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Sorry for all the technical difficulties, y'all. This is what happens when we're doing a Zoom virtual event. Obviously, I'd love to be in person with all of you. But I think Dr. Carr just came back. So let's have Dr. Carr speak for a little bit. Dr. Carr, can you hear us? Okay. Is it just me, Mandeep? Do you see Dr. Carr? I'm like just scanning the screen.
Just now, I saw her sit back down, but then.
Okay. Yeah, I
can just share a couple lines there. For 6 Punjabis, especially, it's you know, it goes way beyond before Trump. I think we have to be careful. We don't kind of drop the recent administration. I mean, they definitely like made it worse. But you know, going back, we had a Gurdwara, which is a place of worship, open up. Actually, Rajiv got it back. Here we go.
Yeah, I don't know. My device, my computer started getting unstable right when I logged on. So I'm here now.
Great. Hey, well, welcome back.
Thank you.
So we were kind of talking about experiences that you might have had as far as anti-Asian hate and discrimination, and what you could share with the people on this meeting.
Yes, yeah. First of all, thank you for having me here, and I appreciate everybody who's organized this program, and especially the elected officials who are here supporting us. And as I mentioned, as you introduced me already, I partially heard that. That, you know, I have been in this area for quite some time. And interestingly, when we were talking a little bit about cultural, you know, competency, it just took me back to my high school when I was a part of the Asian American Club. And I shared my culture with, you know, other people also from Asia at that time. You know, and I'm not sure how familiar the community is on who Sikhs are and where they come from. You know, Sikhs come from northern India, and Sikh generally means a disciple, and it's you know, you're a, you know, student essentially all your life. You're learning, you're connecting to your spiritual aspect of your life, you're connecting to the temporal part of your life. And just like the rest of the Asian American community who have immigrated here, and myself, I immigrated as a child, you know, basic ethics, work ethics are important to us, to most Asians and other immigrants who are in this country. The spiritual aspect of being a Sikh also is important because it takes us to, you know, meditation, to reading scriptures and being a good person essentially, and as well as sharing one's earnings. And, you know, Sikhs have been in this, you know, in America since the late 1800s. You know, it's been over 125 years, and have also been a target of systemic racism and such. And I will talk to you a little bit about you know, I'll mention a few incidences, but mainly the incidents that happened at the Sikh Gurdwara. And I think, Josh, I think maybe you were there. I think I saw you there, I met you there, and I really appreciate you, your community, the Japanese community, supporting and coming out whenever, you know, anything happens in another community. This is what we're here. We are all supporting one another through such racism type of events. That specific event was when a vandalism had occurred on a concrete sign that was placed at this new Sikh Gurdwara, which Gurdwara means the Guru's door, or which is open to people of all different religions, cultures, you know, etc. There's no discrimination on that. Anybody can come in. And so so at this Gurdwara that was opened up in Orangeville, that had just been initiated, you know, with a welcoming event for the community a couple of days, just that weekend. Monday morning, this was on January 14, 2020. This was seen that there was a swastika spray painted on this structure, on this concrete structure, and then it said white power. A neighbor had seen it and had covered it up. And actually at this Gurdwara, there is a small home where the volunteers or we call them brothers essentially, who read the scriptures, who sing the scriptures with music, that lived there, didn't know, weren't familiar with, what is this about? And, the neighbors came and told them, this is what happened. And, I heard from another volunteer, she called me and we were, and I talked to a couple other people, were very hurt by this. This hateful sort of a response by maybe the community, maybe by somebody from the outside area that had come and done this. We did bring it to light. We did bring it to attention of the public, which was very important. And the community itself was very warm and was very supportive. The local residential community was very supportive, and said, this is really not how we feel. We welcome you here. But unfortunately, we see that the face of fascism is still here in our country, in our community, and very close to our homes. And it is there. And our job is to educate people and to get together and to support one another. And that's really what happened at that time. We had a sort of a housewarming event, and we invited the community, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Japanese community, and anybody else who was, willing to stand by us during this time of difficulty, and thus, feeling more, empowered and, actually coming more closer to one another and supporting each other through this tough time, because we all, are here, we live in a world that's very busy these days in America, and we have children that we're raising, we have a community. Support. And it was a difficult time, of course, and it just gave us a realization that white supremacy is still out there, and it's unfortunate, and it requires a lot of work by all of our communities to come together and either build institutions or work into our institutions, in education and love and cultural competencies, both in our schools, in our police enforcement, in our our elected officials. I think it's just one of those things where if you get to know your neighbor, you might actually come to love each other and not hate each other, right? So that's really the concept here. And so if there's any other questions, I don't want to take too much time on this event.
Hey, Josh, you're on mute.
Yeah, okay.
But Dr. Carr, I totally remember that get together and the community support that came right after that incident, and it was just beautiful to see. So I think there's a Zoom poll that we're going to be taking right now. Is that poll up, or can we get that up? It's basically to ask if you've experienced anti-Asian hate.
Yes, the poll is up. So if folks can take it, we will go straight into the breakout session. And thank you so much, Dr. Carr and Kelly, for sharing. I really wish we had more time. This is what happens. We have 1 hour and 30 minutes set aside, but we will just keep going. And what I've also shared with folks is that if you put your experience in the chat, whatnot, we can also make sure to share that out and make it anonymous as well. Wanted to share that as well, because we are capturing all the notes in the chat, recording this conversation to build on our 2 remaining convenings as well. So just wanted to share that.
I just want to mention, Mandeep also mentioned this, we were so happy that we had the commemoration of the park in Elk Grove this past weekend of the 2 grandfathers who were killed walking down Stockton Boulevard. And please check that out. It's called Koran Singh Park.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Carr.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and jump right in. My name is Megan, and thank you so much, Ryan, for sharing that poll. It looks like it's closed, and overwhelmingly, I think a large portion of our community has experienced anti-Asian hate. As Councilmember Mai Vang said, if you want to share your experience in the chat, unfortunately, we don't have time to, really kind of bring folks on. Feel free to do so, and we can kind of, I think they're gonna, share some of these narratives anonymously with the community so that we can put those out there. I'm going to move quickly into our next portion of, we have limited time. We're going to spend a couple of minutes in breakout sessions. Our wonderful tech team is going to take us there. And the facilitators in the breakout sessions are going to ask you a question about your reflections and how you experience this convening. So please feel free to share. We'll do our best to get folks who want to share in, and then we'll come back and we'll have further instructions. So Ryan, take it away.